We used to have a joke, wolf. So we used to always say that every few months there'll be some news that, oh, it's coming out right now. And then it'll never used to come out, never got notified. So we used to say this is a game of wolf. But when it finally got notified, I sent a message to my friend who used to crack this joke that the wolf has come. 72 hours are brutal for a healthcare organization to report a data breach. While they say that large volume of data, they have not quantified what is large volume. I think consent management will be mostly taken up by current KPO, BPO providers. The first thing the news will report is breaking news today. X and X company is fined 250 crores, being the first to be fined. Nobody will ever forget you after that.
Hi, Vikram.
Hi, Manas.
Welcome to the show. And so 2023, the DPDPA was first drafted and it came out in the public domain. And then it's now notified in 2025. Now, with that, the compliance, the burden of compliance is on the organizations now. And like any regulation, there are multiple challenges. First, of understanding what is DPDPA, its nuances, and the what are the compliance requirements, and the entities involved, and etc. etc. So we would, in this episode, we would like to know from you as to how the organizations will chart their courses through DPDPA towards final compliance and continued compliance, given the context of different types, shapes, and sizes of organizations, right?
Sure, Manas. Great to be here. And I'm happy that after 2 years it got notified. You know, we used to have a joke. Wolf. So we used to always say that every few months there'll be some news that, oh, it's coming out right now. And then it'll never used to come out, never got notified. So we used to say this is a game of wolf. But when it finally got notified, I sent a message to my friend who used to crack this joke that the wolf has come.
Right. So even now, although it is notified, the compliance probably will kick in about 18 months' time.
Correct.
So organizations still have a little bit of time. So I think the government took so much time because of public consultations, and there were lots of different opinions. So I really hope that all the nuances that were sorted out in the final version of DPDPA are organization-friendly, compliance-friendly, innovation-friendly, and so on.
Correct.
Right. So let's understand. So there are 7 cornerstones of DPDPA, really. And those are consent and transparency, purpose limitation, data minimization, accuracy, storage limitations, security safeguards, and accountability. All right. So that's quite a lot in terms of aspects or principles that organizations have to take care of. And in terms of entities, data principle, which is pretty straightforward to understand who is our data principal. But then there are data fiduciaries and there are significant data fiduciaries. So that makes it a little bit tricky. So all these nuances and aspects we got to understand from an organizational compliance point of view and understand as to how do we go forward really towards continued achieving the compliance and continued compliance. Right, and there again, we would have entities like consent managers. So there needs to be a bit of clarity on who are consent managers, what are going to be their roles, and how organizations interact with the consent managers, the role of data protection board, and penalties. Of course, most importantly, the scary part,
Correct.
is the amount of penalties involved. Right, so with that, let's get into some questions.
Sure.
And take your opinion. Now, probably starting at a high level, where should most organizations start in their compliance, DPDPA compliance journey? Whether it's going to be consent, setting up the consent infrastructure, setting up security safeguards, or organizational structure building, for instance, appointing data protection officers.
So I would say that, the Digital Personal Data Protection Act. If you look at the philosophy, which is based on privacy principles, and it is very much influenced by the GDPR and the California Privacy Act as well. Now, the fundamental questions are fourfold. Why are you collecting data? What are you going to do with the data? How are you going to dispose of this data? And is there a way to govern this data? Those are the four actually primary questions being asked through DPDPA. Now, if I had to look at it in a phase-wise approach and assume you have 18 months to do it, my number one job will be to look at data mapping and governance. Answering some of those questions I said in the beginning. Where are you collecting data? Why are you collecting data? What are you going to do with it? That is very, very important. I think without that, that should be the starting point. Whether you do an assessment, you do a self-assessment, or you hire somebody to do an assessment, or you use a tool for an assessment. It's very important to understand why are we collecting this data and what is the governance of this data today. I think that is step number one. Step number two is you need to build the architecture, like you rightly said, for a consent management mechanism. What is going to be the architecture? How are we going to take consent? How are we going to renew the consent? And if the consent is withdrawn, what are we going to do? Right? That is very clear. Three is, they are very basic, and I'm talking all this in the context of healthcare. I spent all my time in healthcare, and most of my responses will be in the context of healthcare. Mm-hmm. We in healthcare do not have, I believe, the right role-based access control mechanism. We don't have it. We are not built that way because we are built to serve the patients, to look at patient care, to look at emergency care. We don't have that mechanism built in. So the third step will be to build in security safeguards. And this has to work in parallel along with your consent mechanism architecture, which includes things like encryption, role-based access, monitoring, whether you do it through SOC or SIM or whatever solutions. And in case something happens, what is your security management? How are you going to respond to an incident? I think those mechanisms have to be put in place. I think only after all this should you appoint a data protection officer. If you don't have the first three, there's no point in having a data protection officer come there and sit. And it adds to CapEx. It leads to OpEx, not CapEx, and he's got nothing to do. So he or she needs to be appointed only after you've cleared the first three steps. And last, not the least, how would you manage the risk? How would you reduce time to manage such a situation? How would you align your investments in light of DPDPA? And there are many nuances, and our favorite topic, AI, will come up. So in context of DPDPA, how are you going to keep your investments in line? I think those will be the first 5 things I'll do.
Okay, that's excellent. Thank you for that, Vikram. And second question is, the point I mentioned that we have data fiduciaries and we have significant data fiduciaries. What is the difference of these two types of entities? I mean, both are organizations, but what is the criteria, hard criteria, so to say, to determine whether an organization falls into the bracket of significant data fiduciary or a normal data fiduciary? Because this is important because additional compliances are going to be put in place, have to be put in place for significant data fiduciaries as well. So
the not so good news for healthcare is almost all of the industry will end up becoming significant data fiduciary, especially genomics, most hospitals, most diagnostic labs, and most CDMO organizations, the ones who run clinical trials. They will become significant data fiduciaries. This is how I interpret it right now, unless a specific exception is made for them. The reason for that is difference between a data fiduciary and a significant data fiduciary is that a significant data fiduciary has large volumes of personal data. It is sensitive data, which is health, biometrics, things like that. Potential harm can be caused by using that data, which is very true in case of healthcare. There can be a national interest impact, because if you have a celebrity, you have a politician, you have a government officials, or you have an industrialist whose data gets leaked, significant national interest can be harmed. Use of artificial intelligence for profiling can be done with that data, which is very true for healthcare. You can easily, once you have healthcare data, you can do anything. And it has a systemic footprint, which is very true for healthcare because we have longitudinal data. So it can exist in so many forms, in a LIS system, in the CAM system, in the PAC system. So you can really have systemic footprint. Now, given all this, healthcare automatically becomes a significant data fiduciary, and not all of healthcare. Certain industries may be exempt. For example, pharmaceutical industry, just manufacturing and distribution of drugs, they may be exempt. They still have data, but mostly distributors, doctors, retailers. But hospitals, diagnostic labs, genomics labs, CDMOs, they'll definitely fall into it. And that is the way I interpret it today. Now, of course, this industry could argue its way out of it. But the advantage so far is, while they say that large volume of data, they have not quantified what is large volume. It is TB, is it petabytes, what is that large volume? So that's one way out. Overall, if you look at our healthcare industry, we are very fragmented. So systems don't speak to each other. That could be another defense, that my systems are not talking to each other. We are still broken. We are not, even if my systemic footprint is high, the system doesn't speak to each other. So you can't leak from one area and expose me completely. You might have a few things, but you will not have everything. And it's very unclear if a significant data fiduciary will be applied at an individual hospital level or at the group level. I'll give you a case in point. So we have hospitals. Let me take an example like Manipal Hospital. So should it be at Manipal Hospital MHE level, Manipal Health Enterprises level, or should it be Manipal Old Airport Road? Because the volume of data is very different for different entities of Manipal. If you look at Varthur, may have lesser data than Old Airport Road. So there are some areas which look like a breather right now, but if I look at it at the spirit of the Act, hospitals will end up as significant data fiduciaries.
Right. So, say for instance, if we take up initiatives such as centralizing single point of data storage or data management for the healthcare sector. So, for instance, we don't have centralized EHRs, right? So, if we implement from a national level something driven by the regulators, the systems of EHRs, wouldn't it solve the problem? Because then the consent management and data privacy will have to be in one single place rather than fragmented and floating around in different places.
Yeah, it will definitely solve the problem. The only challenge we are seeing now, for example, let's take the US healthcare system, which is one system that follows it. But the cost of hosting that data, interoperability of the data, exchange of data is significantly high.
Right.
So unless and until we find a way, and which I believe we can, of reducing the cost of all that, it will become very prohibitively expensive, and then the healthcare costs get passed on to the patients, consumers, which is going to be cross purposes at what the government is trying to do through DPC or drug price control and Ayushman Bharat, where they're trying to limit the costs for certain procedures, surgeries. Medicines are already governed by it.
Right.
So, yes, your idea fundamentally is the right one, and that's the way we should go about it. But it will require various departments to come together and find a way first to reduce the cost of hosting and sharing that data. Otherwise, it is not going to take off in India.
Yeah, I mean, the place we are in, it's a long way to go.
Correct. And this is a great idea for any founders who are listening to us right now.
Right.
If they find a way of doing it in a cheap manner, then there is an opportunity, huge opportunity. I think this should be I believe this is one of the hottest opportunities in India. Because while everybody is going on creating startups, venture capital is promoting these startups, as well as pretty mature industries where PE money is there, in creating services. The service layer to support these healthcare services is pretty weak in India, and this is going to be a great opportunity.
Right. All right. So another aspect of DPDPA is going to be reporting. So should a breach happen or incident happen, data breach happens, the window to report that incident to the regulator is 72 hours. So what are the steps or mechanisms that a large organization, especially in healthcare, that organization should put in place to make that happen? Because it's not easy.
Yeah, see, I have lived through many cyber breaches, and they used to usually happen on the 24th or 25th of December. That is the ideal time when cyber attackers will attack a healthcare organization.
What's special about that?
Christmas, New Year, weakest time, everybody's on downtime, nobody's available. That is a long weekend.
Absolutely.
I'm sure you have travel plans.
Yes.
We just now discussed. I know half a dozen people who already have travel plans. So this is the best time because it throws in panic, and second is nobody's around to take decisions. And I've lived through this every December since at least 2018. Now, 72 hours are brutal for a healthcare organization to report a data breach or cyber breach of any kind. It's too less of a time period. While the already IT Act and the government itself has given recommendations that it should be done within this time period, the biggest challenge we face is most healthcare organizations do not realize they are breached for a while. And this is partly because the hackers themselves have gotten very sophisticated. They get in and they stay there for some time. They keep monitoring all the activities and then they disclose it. And number two, because there is no mechanism by which the healthcare organization is monitoring continuously. In order to monitor continuously, you need a security operations center. And I can count on my fingertips how many hospitals, for example, have security operations center, right, in India. So one, you don't know, then how do you report it? You only come to know when somebody sends you a mail asking for whatever, ransom or whatever, ransomware, bitcoins, etc. And that is when you think about reporting it. By that time, you don't know how long the breach has been. And then the ideal steps is first, of course, you have to notify the police. You have to file a report. You have to notify your company secretary. If you are a listed entity, the company secretary has to report to SEBI because of LODR requirements, whether there was any materiality in the breach. That is, did you lose operations or did it have any material impact on the organization because of the loss of operations due to the breach? Then obviously you have to report to the cyber cell from the government of India. CERN. Sorry. You have to report to CERN. Then ideally you should have what we call as the CM, Security Information Event Management response in place.
Yeah.
That what are you going to do next? Are you going to go offline? Are you going to take backups? Are you going to block all ports? And the entire communication around it, right? And you're communicating to various entities. Of course, you have to have your legal involved. You have to have the CFO involved. You need to have a war room. And to do all that within 72 hours is going to be very difficult for healthcare organizations. So they will definitely face a challenge with this requirement. Having said that, what we have understood from previous attacks is that the attacks will continue to happen. There used to be a code earlier, Manas, healthcare was left out of all this. But all that changed after COVID. And COVID was a trigger point where a lot of healthcare organizations got attacked. So I don't think we are ready. But there are some things you can do. Number one, I think a lot of healthcare organizations need to focus on some kind of scenario planning and wargaming. And what you should do is you should preempt all this, assume breach position, that you going to be breached. Go with that assumption, have a pre-approved workflows, legal communication, your whatever law firm you work with, understand what all has to be done by whom, and divide the responsibilities and keep it ready, because this is how things are. Your highly vulnerable systems, your most vulnerable systems are your medical devices, because we don't upgrade them on time. The software is still running Windows XP sometimes, your PACS, your EHR, HIS. Make sure that you either keep them in segregated network or keep them with multi-factor authentication. it will not solve your problem, but it will slow the progress of the attacker. Gives you enough time to respond. Number 3, always make sure that your employees are fully aware of DPDPA requirements and overall cybersecurity measures. Because we want, in healthcare is a clear case, 70% of the attacks are from inside. That somebody has let the attacker in, clicked on a link. So I think that employee awareness is the key. Having said all that, I think 72 hours is going to be difficult. Practically, it's going to be difficult. It's very easy to state it on paper and say, do it. It'll be very difficult.
Yeah. Especially when we don't have a playbook already present.
Correct.
Yeah.
And
so setting up those playbooks is going to be very, very critical.
Yeah, I've seen cases in which the attack has happened and 48 hours have gone, 50 hours have gone, and 3 days have gone, and everybody is now traveling back to the headquarters to get together and decide what is to be done. So the window's already passed.
Absolutely. All right. So let's change track to a slightly different angle. Consent managers. So that's another interesting part of the whole DPDPA system.
Correct.
Now, we need to have a bit of clarity in terms of who are going to be this consent manager and how the organizations are going to interact with this consent manager. So what reporting responsibilities organizations will have to the consent managers, what is going to be the role of the consent manager, etc.?
So I think consent management and consent managers is going to be the new hot industry in India after the 18 months pass. Because a lot of organizations will not be able to invest in a consent manager specific to them. So you will see a lot of shared services that come up. Imagine DPDPA is applicable to a PHC, a CHC, not so much for the government, but even gram panchayats have to abide by it, corporate hospitals have to abide by it, multinational pharmaceutical companies have to abide by it, as well as domestic device manufacturers have to abide by it. So the range of coverage is very high, and we call them healthcare, but each one is a different industry by itself.
New business opportunity.
Let's
talk about it.
This is the hottest new business opportunity today. If I say apart from the EHR, the centralization of data workflows, which I think is very capex intensive still. Yeah. This one's like ready to go. It's like
absolutely.
So I think this is going to be the hottest activity. Now fundamentally what has changed philosophically, you have a generic all-purpose consent, which we sign even today.
Absolutely.
To a very specific consent. For what purpose? Remember the 4 questions I asked. Why are you collecting? What are you going to do with it? How are you going to manage it? And what will be the deletion mechanism? Now this is specific consent. So I'm going to ask you your name and your number and your email. And the reason for it is I'm going to send you an email about all my upcoming podcasts. And if you don't want to receive it, you have to send a mail here and we will delete your email from this thing and it will be deleted from my cache as well. Now that is what they have to do for every time they collect any personal information. So this is a big change, and that's why consent management and consent management platforms, they will be hot. That is the hottest new thing and everybody should invest in it. It's a great time to do it. Now, the challenge we have in healthcare, and I keep talking about this because our HIS and electric health record systems, we are not built for granular consent management flags. We can't give consent at that granularity. The systems are not built like that. A lot of the other ERPs are built like that, but not the healthcare systems. Second, if I have to build in consent management into my workflow, we mess with the biggest superstars of the healthcare industry, the doctors, scientists, the rock stars. They don't want any disruption in which the way they have made their workflow. So again, that means you have to take them into consultation. Then I believe that the consent managers, they themselves will have to understand. One is you just be a consent manager, you give consent, take consent, but why are you doing it? And how will you keep updating that consent? So they become regulated intermediaries. So I will say that consent management will also get very industry specific. So there'll be expertise in consent management for hospitals, expertise for consent management in say e-commerce. I'll see a high degree of specialization because as the industry evolves, the workflow evolves, each one of these roles will evolve further. There is less control for the organization. In the sense that overall, because I will keep asking what is my consent mechanism for this and why am I collecting it, there's less opportunity for organizations to just play with the data and analyze data. Because I would have taken consent for one specific thing. I'll give you a very good example. Suppose I go to a clinic and the clinic says, you know what, I've collected your data, I'm going to anonymize your data and use it for a particular research. I'll say, what research? I say, we are doing some research on, say, 45 plus year old Indian men on diabetes and how their body is dealing with it. Great. I give my consent. Now, suppose a researcher like Pranav standing here suddenly comes and says, no, I want to use it for blood pressure also. You can't use it.
Yep.
So you'll have to come back to me and say, Vikram, we want your consent for this. We are doing another research. There's no blanket consent. So organization will say, oh, why do I need to go this? We can't use it, so let's not do it. So there'll be less control for the organizations, more control for the data principal. I'll know exactly where my data is going, what is it being used for. But less control for organizations. In the short term, I think that will deter innovation in India. It will deter because you will have to go through the process all over again.
Yeah.
So this is something that I've seen with Europe as well. When Europe went through GDPR, I think it pushed them back. India will get pushed back. But India being India, will find our way, other ways of doing it. And you should also manage consent expiry. See, consent is time bound. So I took consent for 3 years. But the researcher says, no, we now want to do it for another 2 years. So consent expires.
Right.
So consent expiry in research, and this is especially applicable to medical devices, CDMO, clinical trials. You have to keep looking at consent expiry. So consent management will become full-time job.
So you just mentioned Indians being Indians, we will find our way. So there is one way of taking consent, which is you have already taken consent in one of the scenarios, and you need it for doing something else, which may be slightly unrelated, and you send another mail to this person saying that we need your consent for doing XYZ. Now, there is very little chance that this person is going to get back to you with an explicit consent, which is not going to happen. I mean, if you get 5 out of 5 responses, positive responses back out of 100, you are going to be lucky. So that's not going to be workable. That's your point also. But what if we tweak it in a way that, we are going to also use your data for this purpose. If you do not agree, please let us know.
Yeah, that is one way of doing it.
Is that angle permissible?
Implied consent is what. So there's some research done on it. Norway versus Sweden on organ donation, where in Norway it was implied consent, and Sweden it was asked explicit consent. And you had to check no if you didn't want to do it in Norway, but you had to check yes if you had to do it in Sweden. And Norway had more organ donations than Sweden. There are ways to do it. But what I'm saying is consent management will become a highly specialized skill. And it'll be a lot to understand human behavior, human psychology while you design these systems. It can't be straightforward.
And the legalities as well.
And the legalities. And
yes, so whether the implicit consent is admissible or not is also going to be kind of out for scrutiny.
Absolutely. And I think I'll come to it later. There is an inherent risk of trying all this trickery right in the beginning.
All right. Okay. So next question is patient data protection in healthcare segment. Right. So how should healthcare providers approach data minimization to keep things simple? Security safeguards specific to, say, for instance, PACS systems, EHRs, and patient rights like the right to data erasure and portability, especially in the Indian healthcare context.
Yeah, so see, I think the ability to do direct harm is the highest in the healthcare system through personal data. And there are other industries where you can do more harm without healthcare, but in healthcare, the ability to do harm is the highest. Now, the principle should be less is more. So you limit how much data you're collecting. So nowadays I see hospitals, you go to the parking attendant and parking attendant is collecting your number and all. I don't think that is really required. Sometimes they'll put the attendant's name and number on the chit that is put on your chest. So there is going to be significant rework in collecting less data. Limit storage. Definitely limit storage. What you want to store, how much you want to store. There's no need to endlessly store data, because the more you store, the more your liability, because then the whole process kicks in. Then anonymization of data. I think that is something that can be done. It is not that expensive. You can anonymize the data and still store it if you want to store the data. Otherwise, you can store it the way it is and delete it and keep a very minimal usage cycle. The challenge will be enforcing the retention rules. That is where the organizations will face a challenge, because each department, in India, at least in the healthcare industry, each department runs not in a very standardized way. It depends on the head of department. And this is true for labs, diagnostic labs, research institutions, medical devices. We are very driven by whoever is heading it. Of course, in the multinational companies, there are standard rules which can be enforced. But in most domestic companies, we are driven by whoever's heading it and his rules apply. So having standard data retention rules will be very, very important, because we should be very clear at any given point of time what is the data we are carrying and why are we carrying it. The second thing is, I think the biggest challenge we face is from certain security weak points in the healthcare industry. This includes most laboratory information management systems. They are not built for security. They have been connected to the internet, they have been connected to network, but there are inherently security lapses in them. Similarly for EHRs. So you got to continuously audit these systems to understand what is in the data, what is being retained, where are the weak points, are there any chances that data will get lost from here. Now, apart from this, there is a lot of India as a country, and I did a podcast some time ago with Dr. Anup Brahmbhatt, and we talked about physiotherapy there, but he brought out a very important point that in India, the awareness is very, very low. Awareness for your own health, your own body is very, very low. And the awareness for the patient to understand what are his rights as far as data concerned are very, very low. So the patient has to know that he has the right to erasure, unless it's a medical legal case or insurance case. Insurance case, they have to keep it for 7 to 9 years, and medical legal case for perpetuity. But other cases, you can always ask for your data to be erased. You don't need to keep it. And the need for dual storage. Suppose the data is being kept for clinical use versus it is being kept for records. Suppose it's used for clinical research, then it can be anonymized data. So the patient should be clear as to why he's asking for erasure and what are his provisions under DPDPA. The second is data portability. The patient can port his data from one provider to the other if possible. Today it is not being done. So once you're in a hospital, the data is there. You can ask for the data back, and the hospital should be able to give it to you, and you can give it to another. But this should be done interoperably. But we have other issues there. And then the right to correction. Suppose there was a medical legal case. Initially it was filed in a certain way, but later after investigation and judgment, it turns another way. Right? Then the right to correction should be there. Otherwise the record remains the way it is. The right to correction is under DPDPA. So there are a lot of things that the patient needs to be aware, the hospital needs. So it's not 100% the hospital or the healthcare institution's problem. Even the patient and the citizens need to be aware of certain things. And of course the mechanisms to do it. But overall, we have high degree of fragmentation in our industry. That is good in a way and not so good in a way. We have high vendor dependency. We depend heavily on the vendors, whoever is setting up the product. And needless to say, we have very low cyber maturity. So these are going to be deterrents as far as the data protection is concerned for patients.
Right. Just on the data anonymization, and let's say, for instance, you have got a patient record which contains, let's say, a chest X-ray. Mm-hmm. Right. Now, this data is sensitive as long as the chest X-ray is associated with a particular patient. Correct. That means a name, a code, hospital given code, email ID, phone number, etc., etc. Now, what are the provisions for erasure, etc., erasure or let's say erasure of anonymized data belonging to a particular patient?
Today?
today?
Before DPDPA?
Before and after?
So today we don't even know where all this data exists, right?
Hmm.
Suppose it exists, let's assume it's an X-ray. So it definitely exists in the X-ray machine.
And in hospital records?
We don't know that.
Okay.
We are assuming it's in the hospital records.
All right.
We know it's in the X-ray.
Yes.
And in the software, whatever is PACS.
Correct.
RIS-PACS is Radiological Information System, PACS, which the X-ray machine is connected to.
Mm-hmm.
We know it will be in the department. It's chest X-ray, so I'll assume pulmonology.
Mm-hmm.
It's there in that records. Whether it's in the electronic medical record of the patient, we don't know. How it is being added, is it a direct addition or it has to be fed in? Where else is this data lying, we don't know. If for a reference it was sent to another department, whether it's lying in that department too. So today, in order to erase some data, even if it's anonymized, I should know where all it exists, right? It's like finding things in a room, in various rooms of your house. So you know there is a mosquito repellent in every room and it's in the plug point. So you can go and check whether it's filled, refilled. But suppose you don't know and there's some object, it is hidden in it could be and it could be absent also. So it becomes very difficult.
And post DPDPA?
First of all, they'll have to, that's why the data, first step I said was data mapping and governance. So you have to establish when data comes in, how does the data flow? Where all will it sit? Which are the databases it will hit? So I know if I have to delete record A, I know which all places I have to delete it from.
Right. So the hospital must know. I mean, patient need not know. I mean, patient can give a
patient has no idea.
Simple instruction that please delete my records.
Yeah, it's a hospital's job.
Responsibility. Yeah. All right. Okay. So I mean, all this become more complicated when you are talking about managing patient records cross-border.
Correct.
So let's say, for instance, you are a international chain of hospitals or international medicine brand or research institution, medical research institution, etc. And records exist cross-border, US, UK, maybe Africa, maybe Asia, and various data centers. What is the applicability of DPDPA on this cross-border data? Belonging to, I'm sure it belongs to, the applicability only will focus on data belonging to Indian patients, right? So how does it make it more complicated?
Yeah, so see the philosophy of DPDPA is that it is localized by default. That's the philosophy, that's the advice. So you localize everything by default, and that's why the other hot sector that has run up quite a lot are data centers. Data centers have been running up for a while, and it's mostly because of our domestic AI demand. Also, if you recall, some time ago, RBI had issued this rule that all financial transactions have to be localized in India, because of which certain banks were not able to issue credit cards. Amex was one, which was, I was an Amex customer, so they couldn't issue any new cards. They could hold on to the existing cards. Now, localization is going to be the philosophy for DPDPA also. Having said that, I think there is an activity called data transfer impact assessment. That is very, very important. If the data has to be transferred, what is the impact of it? What kind of data is it? Why are we transferring it? And what is the reason for it? This could be international patients. This could be patients who are in India for some other reasons but had to take treatment here. This could be patients who got treated outside but have come to India for the follow-on checkups, Indian citizens. So in all cases, we have to understand what is the impact, what are the other regulations that are impacting it, and how we are supposed to react, the hospital or the clinical agency is supposed to react. Similar issue for clinical trials. When you get a trial, of course, all the fiduciary responsibilities, significant data fiduciary, are with the clinical trial administrator, which is usually a CDMO, which runs a trial. No pharma company runs a trial. They just get the anonymized results. So they are exempt from it in a way. But again, if the patients are only from India, if their patients have been mixed with some other patients from abroad, then we have to do an impact assessment to understand what is the impact. I think first, and then there is healthcare systems which are operating in two different countries. There are certain healthcare systems that are in India, but they also have branches abroad. And there are healthcare systems abroad who also have branches in India. So there has to be an inventory of all these records. what are the records are being held by us, which are of our citizens versus other citizens, what are the records being held abroad of our citizens versus the local citizens. So that is going to be slightly complicated, but for that you have to do an impact assessment first, see what is the impact. Second is I think the encryption and key management will be important here. I think it has to be India based. I think DPDPA is slightly clear on it. The encryption for all this data and the key validation has to be India based. So your data can lie anywhere as long as it's anonymized and encrypted and the key is in India, then I think there is some provision for it. I think where we differ greatly from GDPR, for example, is GDPR has certain clauses, standard contractual clauses, which help you in these agreements. In India, it's prohibition first, like don't send data abroad. That is how we are looking at it right now. I don't know practically and remember DPDP is a baby. It's hardly a few months old. There'll be notifications regularly, which will update for the next 18 months as we go along this journey. Last but not the least, I think a lot of the cloud-based healthcare and medical applications have to move to India. And which has already happened. So you see all the big news around has been India data centers, the sites are in India, the locations are in India. That has already happened. I think a lot of these cloud providers will start operating out of India. And the contract research organizations and the CDMOs, clinical trials, remember, now they might have to keep duality of storage. Some in India, some abroad, depending on the patient. So I think from a data perspective, it's going to be great for the data storage operators, your data centers,
consent managers.
I'm telling you, there are going to be. I wouldn't be surprised if the next few hot startups come from the consent management space and say, we are the global consent managers and we manage consent for 2 million people or 3 million people, and that's our hot story. So I think there's going to be a whole set of new industries created because of this.
Yeah. But then, it will become a hot industry, but then there is this fact that they are going to be under much more scrutiny.
Correct.
So they will become a significant data fiduciary, or maybe even a notch level higher in terms of the amount of scrutiny that they are going to face.
Yeah, see, I think consent management will be mostly taken up by current KPO, BPO providers. I think they are the most ideally suited because a lot of them have the process clearance, they have taken certifications, they are ISO certified, they are COBIT certified, and they are in the right position.
Right.
A lot of them have done the EU requirements, they are FDA cleared in certain cases. But having said that, and this is why I feel the first few cases that get caught it'll be very, very bad for the organizations who get penalized, because government by nature will try to make an example. So my advice to everybody, startup or non-startup, don't be the first few to get caught. Because the first few will have it the worst. And then we'll start seeing it
learning
coming
from
down.
it.
Learning from it.
Those are the learning cases.
That is the learning cases, and that's why I said you can do consent management.
Right.
You can do whatever. You can play around.
Yeah.
But if you are caught in the first wave, then it's going to be tough. Because you'll be in the news, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
The first thing the news will report is, in breaking news today, X and X company was fined 250 crores, being the first to be fined. Nobody will ever forget you after that.
Just on that tack, significant data fiduciaries. So what is the level of audit, and what kind of audit that they are going to face? I mean, one is internal compliance responsibilities will be elevated. They have to conduct regular data protection audits themselves internally and present them. But what other kind of scrutiny or compliance checks that they're going to face?
Yeah, so, in all organizations, we always ask them to do a business impact assessment. This is more from a BCP, DR perspective. Now, with this act, especially for significant data fiduciaries, they'll have to do something called a data protection impact assessment.
Yeah.
And most listed entities anyway get audited internally which is for the company by the internal audit team and externally by the stat audit team.
And this is going to be additional.
This is going to be additional scope to it.
Yeah.
So usually what happens is all audit is done on samples, whether it's internal audit or stat audit. So you select samples which are internal audit is mutually agreed, because internal audit is something that you do to help you with the stat audit, right? It is more for internal governance. Stat audit is not as per your convenience. Stat audit is done as per MCA requirements and SEBI requirements, because you are representing the stakeholders and shareholders, especially for listed entities. Anybody above 1,000 crores does this revenue. Now, I think in every sample, after 18 months, data will be picked up, because that is going to become mandatory, especially if you have been classified as a significant data fiduciary. So you have to remember the first 4-5 steps I told you. So they'll have to validate data mapping, the data architecture, consent architecture, breach readiness, become cybersecurity, which is usually a part of the mandate, will become even more important. The other area we haven't talked much about it, and I think it's a miss from our side, is third-party risk. See, healthcare is inundated with third parties.
Yep.
Whether you're pharma, healthcare, device, anything, you have a lot of third parties. Your security configuration. Then AI audits will become more common. Because see, a lot of the data is going to be used to train the AI.
Yeah.
And I know it's a totally different topic about AI, but your AI system audits for a significant data fiduciary will become even higher as to what kind of data was used, why it was used, was the consent taken for using that data, right? And then obviously testing patient workflows, patient right flows, looking at your logs, your data logs, audit trails. So those will become mandatory. Every quarter there will be some audit done on this, both internally and externally. Now the most important thing is, I think organizations should refrain from paper compliance. Just have compliance on paper, but in reality they are not really following it.
Yeah.
Because in today's digital world, you'll get caught very easily. And of late, we have seen stat auditors take a very hard stand against organizations that play around. My own organization did this many times, where they took a very hard stand and walked out of very large audits. So I think there is a risk of doing a paper compliance and not following it, because the chances of getting caught are much higher, and you don't want to be the first few to get caught, right? That's very important. I also think that senior management and executive involvement in the audits is going to be important. Nothing is taken seriously unless the CEO or the board is actively pursuing it. I think it will be a board mandate throughout. I'm sure audit committees will be looking at all DP audits. But the KPIs for your DPDPA program, data protection program, as well as the audits will be looked at very severely by executive management and board. So I think that's going to become an integral part of what is going to be audited.
All right. So, okay. So let's come to, we were talking about the organizations and compliance burden on the organizations, etc. Now let's come to the other side, which is the enforcement that the regulator is will have to put in place, right? So, and that's going to be challenging too, because the way our industry is, the nature of the industry, fragmentation, etc., etc. So what are the challenges you foresee that the regulators are going to face in terms of enforcing DPDPA?
Correct. So I think May 13th, 2027 is the due date. Let's assume that there's no pushback now and we are go from that date. I think the biggest, I think there are certain industries that the regulators will go after directly, which is essentially your high-tech industries, right? Your Alphabet, Meta, the social media, the digital tech industry.
Absolutely.
Because they have maximum amount of data. They are consumer facing and they have a lot of data. I believe
e-commerce
is another one, consumer, banks, fintechs.
Yeah.
I think healthcare's turn will come later because it is not collecting that much data as these organizations are, though they'll be called significant data fiduciaries. I think the fine is enough to drive compliance if it's enforced. I mean, I was looking at GDPR data and not too many healthcare organizations were actually received huge fines for GDPR, at least when I checked, and this was about a year ago. and there were very, very small fines. Some pharmacy chains had got fines and etc. I'd never see a large healthcare institution get a fine from GDPR. Though I saw a lot of consumer organizations, I saw British Airways get a fine, I saw some of the other organizations get a fine. So consumer organizations will probably get bigger fine. I also think that the government will make an example of the first few. So if you are in the first few get into trouble on DPDPA, there will be a big example made out of it just to show they're serious about it. And they did it with GST compliance. They did it with a lot of other things. When the government wants to prove a point, they will go serious on it. I think the biggest issue will come from inside the organization. The CFO, the board, they have to start owning this now, because they will be put on the hot seat themselves. The minute the data is breached or there was no regulation that was followed. But the priorities for the organization should be obviously breach readiness. You can always show that we got breached, but I was ready for it. I took all the precautions, still we got breached, which is given. Your consent mechanism, your data mapping, vendor contracts, your own classification, your evidence management. I think everything the organization can do to show it is ready should be the priority right now.
Absolutely. And just to be clear that the penalties are for compliance breaches and not the actual breaches,
Correct.
Actual data incidents.
Yeah, actual breaches, you can't, see, even in the IT Act, it was very clear. I forgot which section it was, 72 or 62, I keep forgetting, that as long as the custodian of the data has shown that he's taken the precautions, yet he got breached, there's always a safe harbor.
Yeah.
Similarly here, as long as you put the mechanisms in place, yet data was leaked, it is not in your hands, because these are actually, at the end of the day, see, the hackers are criminals. They are breaking the law anyway.
Absolutely.
So it is not, there's nothing much you can do.
Absolutely.
But preparation will amount to a lot.
Absolutely. All right, Vikram, that was extremely insightful. And I think we are much clearer on DPDPA now, our responsibilities and compliance responsibilities, and how the entire ecosystem or the structure of compliance and our responsibilities are going to be there. So thank you very much.
Thank you.